but you know, we're here, we're making it. It is a Monday, so happy big Monday. Happy Easter Monday, actually, everybody. Let's see. That should help out a little bit with my volume, but I very much appreciate anybody who gives some feedback on volumes. Probably have to mess around with that a little bit. Let's see. Alright. So today what we're going to do, since it has been a Monday, ladies and gentlemen, it certainly has, and I just wanted to play a comfy game. And that is what we're going to do. We're going to play Mahoutsukai no Yoru, otherwise known as Witch on the Holy Night, which is set in the Nasu-verse. And it's quite good. It's not got the choices like you would in other visual novels. It's a straight story. But it's pretty well written, and I enjoy it quite a lot. Right now I just booted it up, so it is in the early prologue stage. This really reminds me a lot of one of the first Nasu-verse visual novels that I played, which was Tsukihime, the original Tsukihime, I might add, which I might play at some point. I would really love to. My old computer actually has a copy of it on it, and I might try and resurrect it long enough to transfer those files over. I do have the new version as well, which I enjoyed, but it is a different experience for sure. I've got that on PlayStation though, which I believe I can figure out how to stream with it through Streamlabs, which is what I'm using, but we will play that one by ear. That's a little bit loud. Settings. Audio settings. Can I just have general voice volume? Turn that down a little bit. I'm the streamer. No one's allowed to be louder than me. Now, those are the rules. There we go. Actually, I could turn myself up a little bit more as well. So, let me do that. Let me put it up to 1. See how that works. There we go. Alright. Let's get it started then. Her father would savor his morning coffee, leaving her to venture outside and rev the engine. Out the front door she would go, traversing the garden with icy breath until she reached that old sedan. As always, she inserted the key, then started the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. I like that. I used to do that a fair bit as a kid for my grandmother, actually. Just as she proudly finished the humble task she'd done so many times before, a shrill scream pierced the air. She knew, even though it wasn't human, that the feeble sound was a cry of agony. A few moments passed. Her father came out and opened the hood of the car, creaking fan belts, a monstrous-looking engine, and something that didn't belong. There was a cat, a mother by the looks of it, and her 2 kittens. The 3 cats had been huddled for warmth in the engine's compartment. The mother cat was missing its head. That's pretty brutal. One of the kittens had been mangled beyond recognition by the engine belts and surely died instantly. The other kitten, its face half covered in blood, panted faintly. It desperately clung to its mother, or rather, the chunk of meat that had been its mother, with the last bit of life it could muster. Poor things indeed. Her father lamented their plight. The previous night had been especially cold. After he had returned home yesterday, the cats must have snuck under the hood, drawn by the warmth of the engine. They had slept next to the engine and awoken to a storm of spinning belts. Cars in the 80s were not sealed particularly well, so this is not unheard of. Now that I can attest to. Can't say I've been in that situation, though. Her father's voice seemed so distant. She could only make out a small tuft of the kitten's gray fur. The rest of it was caked in the blood of its mother and brother. I could see its skull, the fragile life of a speckled kitten. Trembling and possibly blind, it continued to nuzzle against its dead mother's chest. Now, this is a very good visual novel, but I will make no bones about it. There are parts that are very not comfy, so viewer beware. Yeah, especially later on. We'll get to those. I do intend to stream this and in its entirety. She took the kitten into her arms and ran deep into the mountains to her grandfather's house. Was it because she was overcome with regret? Or was it the shock of grief? Years later, she still wasn't sure. But fighting back the welling tears, she burst into her grandfather's workshop. Her grandfather was a magician who could do anything. She had never seen magic. She knew that magic was a fantasy straight out of fairy tales, but so was her grandfather. She had to find him. He was the only one who could help. The cave-dwelling magician said indifferently. This kitten needs our help, she pleaded. Whether it was a simple task or Herculean labor, her grandfather would not say. He simply granted the girl's childish wish, like a machine. Before she knew it, however, she was holding a tiny corpse in her hands. Its fur was cold. The warmth of life had left its body, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back poured from her eyes. Regret spread through her chest like an endless gray sky. Her mind struggled to come to grips with what had just occurred. The last 10 minutes were a total blank. Who she met, what she had known, it was all as if it had never happened. The only thing she was sure of was that life, once extinguished, can never return. That day, it was her mistake that gave birth to me. Indeed, whatever occurred that day, it was a day of nostalgia and longing. This is the fairy tale of 8 years ago, the day they first met, that no magic can ever bring back. What an opening, huh? Arrogant, greedy, and able only to destroy. I must be a wolf. I'll have regrets. There's no looking back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the hands of Little Red Riding Hood. Chapter 1. Strange One. Here we are. They really did a great job on some of these visuals. It really lends a lot of visual storytelling. It really puts you in the mood, if not visual storytelling. Perhaps that's not the right term. It was a quiet morning. From her bed, she could see the sky was an ashen, watercolor gray. The thermometer displayed 43 degrees Fahrenheit, a rather unforgiving temperature for November, and one that I personally do not agree with either, having lived in the Midwest. Her stomach woke her up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. But lazy mornings like today's were, for her, a blessing. It was already well past 8 in the morning. On On any ordinary weekday, tardiness would be unavoidable, but today, classes were canceled in commemoration of the school's anniversary. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. Outside the window was gloomy gray, and it reminded her more of evening than morning. It wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination, but having been up all night until just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. All she cared about was more sleep. Again, I feel that. As long as she could spend her morning in bed, what was happening outside was of no concern to her. Close them blinds, girl. She shut the curtains. Ooh, guitar spotted. I've played this before as well, so while I may act surprised, it's more for comedic effect and out of playfulness. I do wonder what this amp is, though. If anybody knows, let me know what that amp is. This looks like a Fender. Well, it's definitely a Fender. It's not a Telly. I feel like a Telly might fit her a little bit better. Or maybe an Epiphone, like a Les Paul body. You know what I'm talking about? I just got an acoustic over here. I'm not sure. Maybe a Yamaha. But then again, maybe a Gibson as well. I've been to the Gibson factory, and there was a guitar that looked like this. Let's get back to the story now. Then, closed her eyes, and tried to let sleep reclaim her.
せめてあと2時間ぐらいは凡庸な夢を見ていられますように。
Blissful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple request would be mercilessly refused. A faint but shrill sound lingered in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her chagrin, her eyes popped open out of habit.
こんな日に限って。
The telephone was situated in the foyer on the first floor. Answering it meant walking down a 30-foot corridor and going down a flight of stairs. In her sleep-deprived state, that distance seemed somewhere between incredibly far and astronomically far. The phone's incessant ringing continued. She knew the caller would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight the urge. She's a better woman than I am. Mostly due to the fact that I'm a man. She thought her housemate would get it, but she soon had to abandon all hope. The realization struck her that her housemate did not have the day off from school and was likely in class at her prestigious little hilltop academy. The caller proved incredibly persistent. That persistence made the volume of the ringing seem even louder.
もうせっかくの安眠を。
I'm trying to sleep here. I've said that before too. She was left with no choice but to get up, throw a top on, and leave the room.
うわ、寒。
I said that before too. She rubbed her hands together to warm her numb fingers. The mansion's heating system was inadequate, to say the least, which meant that winter was the very worst of uninvited guests. Never more so than on a dreary morning as this, when one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. The mansion sat in the mountains and was surrounded by dense forest. Winter always arrived here first, before moving on to nearby towns. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated through the long hallway. The mansion's furnishings had been so perfectly maintained that it made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. That is a real thing. There's a lot of homes that you'll see that people live in that are very, very dead set on being incredibly clean, which there's nothing wrong with. But to me, at least coming from the environment that I did, having just a little bit of clutter and mess, not like messy, but you can tell someone lives there, is much more homier and comfortable. So I can get that. Coupled with the dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house.
ま、 幽霊屋敷そのものだけど
She's not
大体
entirely
2人
wrong.
で住むには広すぎるのよこの家は。
I like her voice acting. I need to look up the voice actors for this game. I quite like them. Also, if you haven't caught already, I will be playing this in Japanese. I don't actually. Is there a English voice? Perhaps not. I've never actually looked for that. So you will get Japanese and you will be happy. And we already have here, I do like this, that they keep it all grayed out until you actually meet the characters. So we know our character that we're following right now is Miss Aoko Aozaki. Now, I do like Aoko quite a bit. However, I'm Team Toko. That's just how it is. That is partly because I first interacted with Nasuverse in a way that I really enjoyed it with Garden of Sinners. And Toko features fairly prominently in that series. So, I really like Toko. But Aoko is nice in her own ways. Sort of. She counted more than 30 rings since it first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands, or had a good understanding of the house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch that it was the latter. The window above looked out onto a gloomy sky. She hastened to catch the unrelenting ring in the act as soon as possible, though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. My great-grandmother had a phone like that, actually. I actually got to use it, too. It's kind of funny. It was here that a series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance to this tale. For whether it be objectively true or merely supposition, it is always from gloomy and unassuming beginnings that extraordinary events are set into motion. Go and get yourself dressed. You got things to do. I do like this opening as well. It makes it feel very cinematic. I think that also helps, in my opinion, with the kind of the tone of it being more of a linear story that you're going to follow along, as opposed to having a lot of choice in visual novels. However, like you can see in other visual novels, if you want to see a little bit more of how a visual novel works, if you are unfamiliar with the genre, go check out my video on the channel on visual novels. Tongue twister myself there. I do think it is a fairly decent video, although perhaps at some point in the future, especially after I play a couple, because I'm enjoying this so far. I would like to play some more visual novels on the channel. I think that's a fun thing that I can probably do. I don't have to be gamer mode to play visual novels, which is quite nice, being a hard-working company man. So maybe I will do that at some point. Does make me kind of nostalgic for Japan, though. I did finalize, if you watch some of the other stuff on the channel, I had mentioned that I would be going back to Japan in September, which I will. I got my tickets, got my hotel squared away, so now it's much more in the planning phase of what I want to do while there. I'm excited for that. I very much enjoyed Japan my first time there. And while it'll be a little bit of a shorter trip this time, I cannot wait to see these sights again. That said, though, as much as I am a walking showcase of the meme that goes along the lines of thing, but in Japan. Find all the joy that you can in your own hometowns. Or if you're not in a hometown, wherever town you find yourself in. Alright, here we go. Witch on the Holy Night. We got the title drop. They said the thing, boys. And in classic Japanese storytelling fashion, we have a high school. The rain had subsided somewhat by the time she reached the school gate. The sunlight seemed to be playing peekaboo behind the clouds in the distance. It looked like it might be cleared up by early afternoon. It never clears up by early afternoon. The weather reflected her luck. On top of her being forced out of the house at such an early hour, she had to suffer through a winter rain. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. The sinking feeling she had only grew as she passed through the entrance and headed inside. She didn't encounter. The reception desk to the faculty room simply read, "Faculty closed." The school had given all of its students the day off, except those explicitly summoned, like her. A fact that irked her more and more as the minutes passed. She opened the door to the faculty room and headed towards the desk she had visited a number of times before. The man at the desk wore a plain shirt and suit that were nonetheless neatly pressed. Pressed. Oh dear, it's late indeed. Slim-framed glasses adored his face, giving off an amicable yet cunning air. The mild-mannered image this mid-20s man presented clashed with the cigarette he smoked. Hey, we got that in common. He didn't appear to have noticed her yet.
Yamashiro-sensei.
She closed the door with a bang. Showing no response to the sudden sound, Mr. Yamashiro lifted his head.
Yeah, ohayo, Aozaki-kun. 要件は聞いているかな?
はい。1時間前に自宅で事前に何の相談もなく。
Having graduated from this high school himself, Mr. Yamashiro was not much older than the rest of the students. For that reason, the students preferred him over the other teachers. Actually, let me pause here and turn a little bit of the audio down again. That should be a little bit better. He always had something interesting to talk about. He kept conversations casual. In fact, he seemed more like an older student than a teacher, but she unfortunately didn't share her fellow students' fondness of him. She was of the opinion that teachers should come across as more austere. Like an iron fist that can inspire both love and hate in equal measure. Not a buddy to joke and pal around with. He was the exact opposite of how she felt a teacher should be. It was only natural that her manner towards him would be forced and unfriendly. Alternatively, she might just be a bit forced and unfriendly anyway. But I digress. I'll give her a hard time, but I do like alcohol. Not that she'd ever been wired to make friendly small talk. Case in point.
今日もご機嫌斜めみたいだね、君は。
それは先生の気のせいです。今日だけ特別という話ではあり。
The matter-of-fact answer perfectly matched the displeasure displayed on her face. Her bad mood from having to get up early and the tiredness from staying up late must have collectively made her look positively adversarial.
そうならいいんだけどね。 彼にはそう辛く当たらないでくれよ。僕らじゃ正直どう扱っていいかわからないところもあるし。
先生、その件ですけど、私まだ詳しい話を聞かされていないのですが。
As Mr. Yamashiro met her piercing eyes, he finally understood the reason behind her tone and slowly put out his cigarette.
電話じゃあなんて聞いたの？
Let's start at the beginning. What did they tell you over the phone?
転入生の
That is
紹介をす
always
る
a
と
very
だけで
concerning
す。
thing to hear.
理由も
One of Mr. Yamashiro's eyebrows stood up, impressed with the brevity of her answer. He could see that she was angry, not because she had been called to school on her day off, but because she hadn't been told why she was here. Mr. Yamashiro chuckled sympathetically.
先生、これが笑い話ならそろそろ帰っていいでしょうか。
いや、ごめん謝るよ。冗談じゃなくて真面目な話なんだ。
本当に転入生の問題で。
Classic. There's a transfer student.
訳ありというか
With
難しいというか
difficult
彼
circumstances.
宗十郎君というんだけど、ちょっといろいろとずれていてね。僕らが案内してあげるより同世代の君の方が適任だと思ったんだ。
Sojuro. She threw him an unamused look. It was negligent of them to be pushing teaching duties on her, but she did wonder how exactly this transfer student was peculiar. Maybe he meant the student had behavioral problems or was difficult somehow, but peculiar? She didn't have the slightest idea what that meant.
ずれてるなんてそう使わない表現だけど。
Obviously, you didn't go to a very interesting school. She had her doubts, but she swept them aside for now. This wasn't the time to get distracted by more concerns. The fact remained that this conversation was all the peculiar she could handle, and she needed more information. She was already beginning to fantasize about saying no and curling up in her warm bed at home.
一つ質問があります。
However, she does have a question first.
あ、学年は君と同じ2年生だよ。性格は落ち着きがあって人の話をよく。青崎くんとはクラスは違うけどきっと仲良くな。
Okay.
そういったことは本人から直接聞きますし、そうではなく、
She's so
なぜ私なんで
brash.
しょうか。
Though her tone was still stern, it was clear that she was willing to cooperate. She had decided to put her feelings of dissatisfaction aside and focus on the task at hand. Forcing herself to act empathetic in spite of her self-absorbed nature was something she was used to. Whew. Paradoxically, this force of will was also the reason teachers put so much faith in her. To a point. At times, that strength shattered expectation, and on those occasions, they were left with no choice but to treat it like a natural disaster and weather it until it passed. That was how Mr. Yamashiro had come to deal with her as over the past year.
もう一度だけ聞きます、山城先生。それで、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Pressured by a question without a clear yes or no answer, he answered,
それはね、別に青崎くんが先生方に敬遠されているのと同じぐらい信頼されていて、学校のためなら教師も生徒も一緒くたに切って捨てる鉄。
それ以外にこんな呼びつけを受ける理由はないと思いますけど。
Not my style, but I do like his suit. Don't like the patterning on it. Otherwise, I quite like it. And the waistcoat as well, the suit vest there. That's a good touch. I think a classy, tasteful use of texture and color with a suit vest is very good. Not a fan of the chunky tie though. Not a big fan of that, but hey, nobody's perfect. It is very, very professorial. You know what I mean? Look, that he looks like if he was like 10 to 20 years older, like model college professor. All right. Her eyes did nothing to hide her disbelief as she glared at him. Strength far beyond that of an ordinary 17-year-old girl. coupled with the youthful beauty of one. Mr. Yamashiro let slip a genuine smile, admiring the miraculous balance of qualities.
いや責務だけでいいなら僕がやってるさ。この人選に関しちゃ教師や生徒会長といった役職も関係ないよ。なんていうかこんな頼みを損得抜きで聞いてくれるのは君だけだと思ってね。適任ですからと強く推薦したわけ。
In other words, he knew she wouldn't say no.
山城先
I've
生
been on that end of things as well, both personally and
うわ
professionally.
怖っ。もう睨まない睨まない言ったろ。僕にはともかく彼には笑顔
To
で
be
って。
honest, I could use a little bit of the brashness that Alco
ま
has.
あ
It balanced me
納
out pretty
得して
well.
くれたならすぐに移動しよう。もう随分待たせてしまっているからね。それと雨の中ご苦労様。帰りはもちろん車で送るよ。
Mr. Yamashiro stood up gracefully. Just turned him down. That is one thing that I couldn't get coming from the environment that I did. I would never have a ride with a teacher. He'd been waiting for about an hour. While he did, the rain shower lightened into a drizzle. His mind wandered as he listened to the sound of the raindrops. The room was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. He was the only one there. Quite some time had passed since he had been brought to this room and asked to wait. Even the best behaved student might have grown dissatisfied or anxious with the situation by now, but the boy stuck to his spot like a scarecrow. He was chilled to the bone. It was the end of November, and the low temperature in the morning had marked the start of winter. The room was not much warmer. The heater hadn't been turned on. Either he'd missed the teacher telling him to turn it on, or he'd never seen one in his life. He breathed lightly on his freezing fingers as he aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. This dreary place was apparently a meeting room. The other students might have considered it a wonderful place to meet, but to him it was drab and overly spacious. It was a lifeless place that reminded him of an arid cave. Stuck in this cold room with absolutely nothing to do, his mind turned to what they wanted to discuss. Unable to come up with a solid answer, he returned his attention to the sound of the rain. The rain hardly resembled the rain in the mountains, though he could still recognize it, barely. Its smell and sound were harsher, but at the end of the day, rain was still rain. Thank you for your wise words, Sojiro. So even this world, alien as it was, could have something in common with the mountains. That trivial detail perked him up a little. And to give him credit, that is something that is very true. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Sort of along those lines, I suppose. He liked how the town looked soaked in rain. Naturally, he preferred sunny weather, but he liked rain in its own way. The fog from the rain had soaked up the scent of the soil, and it reminded him of home. It was at times like these that he was able to numb the anxiety the city gave him. But then he let out a discouraged sigh. How pathetic. He'd already been here 2 weeks, and thoughts of his hometown still made him sad. Perhaps feeling that he was being unfair to his new life, he composed himself and continued to wait patiently. As if having a passion for distractions, his attention returned to the sound of the rain once more. Waiting like this didn't seem to be particularly hard for him. He quietly endured the numbing cold and the hour alone with calm, deep breaths. As the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. A strong point of his or not, he was astonishingly patient. He's also got bandages up on his throat. It was certainly helping him out in this moment. Oh Lord, she coming. Oh Lord, she coming. She, on the other hand, was livid. The profile of the transfer student had been explained to her on her way to the meeting room. She was told he had lived his whole life up in the mountains without any electricity. That meant more than half of civilized society would have been an utter mystery to
な
him.
んて絶望的な断絶。戦後どころか戦前の話じゃない。
Robinson Crusoe.
ロビンソンにも程がある。
She had every right to be angry. I'm not going to argue with her. Mostly because I like my nose unbroken. His village had apparently remained isolated in the mountains for many years. Contact with villages in the foothills of the mountains only occurred once a month or so, which was unfathomable to modern Japan. Although expressways and Japan Rail, the old national railways, now span the country like arteries, it wasn't entirely impossible for mountain villages like his to exist. But she couldn't imagine how someone born to such circumstances would think or live.
電気がないって村に行き渡っていないだけで公衆電話ぐらいはあったんですよね。
なかったそうだよ。こっちに暮らすようになってまず驚いたのが電話だそうだし。電話って便利ですねなんて真顔で言われてね。そういえばそうだなぁと再確認させられたぐらいだよ。
She shot a sidelong glare at his way as he laughed. It seemed that the naivete of the country boy had cheered up Mr. Yamashiro a bit.
駐在もいないってことか。うちも実家は山奥ですから電気が通っていないのはありえないとは言いませんけど。そいつ学校も知らないんですか？
うん。どんなものかは知っていたそうだけど実際来るのは今日が初めてらしい。ああいうのも野生児っていうのかな。狼に育てられた狼少年みたいな。あ、いや探検隊の話だね。
I like Mr. Yamashiro's sense of humor.
怖いな青崎くん。冗談だって。そう睨まないでくれ。大丈夫。話してみた感じおとなしい子だったから。なんていうか言葉の通じない小動物みたいな感じ。
山城先生、その例え気休めになってませんから。
As she gave her blunt reply, she tried to simulate in her mind what life without electricity would be like, but the thought of it took her sour mood from bad to worse. After all, it was a world she had never known. She could understand why the teachers had given up. She, too, wanted to give up and return to her warm bed, but her good-for-nothing pride was holding her hostage. Not only did the teachers believe she was up to the task, but she also believed that she could do it. It wasn't that easy to go back on her word, no matter how bad things looked after the fact. She walked along the hallway, rain pattering in the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of meeting the unknown stranger within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going into battle.
いや青崎くん、君を信頼してる僕だけど念のため確認しておくよ。
At least try
なんて
to
いうか
smile.
優しくね。できれば笑顔とか作れないかな。
作り笑いは苦手です。一応努力しているつもりですが。
Well, you can't say
そうなんだ。
she's
それはよかっ
not
た。
honest.
いや
At
ー
least.
ほんとよかった。青崎くんにも苦手なものってあったんだね。
Mr. Yamashiro's shoulders slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand to the door, his eyes seemed to say to her, "Be nice, please." This only made her more irritated.
分かってるわよ、愛想が悪いってのは。でも笑顔なんて意識して作るものじゃないんだし。だいたいそういうインスタントな人付き合いなら飛び丸の方が向いてる
Let
っ
me
て。
mention of another character, a Tobimaru. She sighed about her social shortcomings, but then it occurred to her that being called into school on a day off while sleep deprived wasn't anything to smile about anyway. She also thought that the person responsible for this mess would be better off attending elementary school. It might not be his fault, but neither was it her duty or obligation to do the teacher's work for them. At the very least, they could have used their brains and organized all this on a normal school day. Another complaint she wanted to voice later.
いや、というか敵。なんであろうと敵。悪いけど、情状酌量以前に敵。間が悪いのはお互い様っていうか、ほんと、なんでよりにもよってこんな忙しい時に。
When she's so busy, she says. Her pounding headache from a lack of sleep had boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy on the other side of the door may be, anyone who disturbed her sleep was the enemy. And just as she was reaching peak annoyance, Mr. Yamashita opened the door to the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities, just looked straight ahead and stormed into the room, and found herself face to face with the most unusual opponent. Before we go on, let's see from another's perspective. And at that point, I think this is a good stopping point for us today. Not a very long stream, but it is a work day after all. In any case, I hope you guys join me again for another stream for this. I'll probably put this up on the channel, maybe, possibly, as videos. But I had fun, and this helped me improve my mood quite a bit, and I hope it will for you if you watch this, whether you were here today or if you watched it another time. In any case, guys, I appreciate you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.